Hey there, I'm Rick Barker, founder of the Music Industry Blueprint and the fan club, #1 fan club member of the RenmanMB here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Rick, first off, I'm happy to have you here today. You've had a long experience in the music business across a number of different jobs, you know, whatever you want to call them, radio programmer, manager. I'm leaving
wherever they'd let me in, man. Yeah,
yes,
wherever they'd let me in.
Of course. The toughest thing about getting going in this business is getting started.
Sure.
And the truth is there are as many stories of getting started as there are people that have succeeded in the business. So let me ask you the same question I've asked everybody. How'd you get started in this wacky music business?
I've always had a love for radio. Radio was my thing. It's funny because I heard a guest of yours talk about Start with the Broom. I used to sweep up at Fame Recording Studio in Muscle Shoals, Alabama with Rick Hall and those guys. And one of the gals that I went to church with, her dad owned a gospel radio station. So when I was 14, I got to take, they were reel-to-reels at that point, and I would take the church service reel-to-reels off, and then for 2 hours, I was able to play what was called at the time contemporary Christian music, and it was Amy Grant and Sandy Patty and those gals. And then I ended up moving to California when I was 18, and on my 18th birthday, my buddies took me to a strip bar. And I was talking to one of the girls, and she loved my voice, and she asked if I would announce her set. And I'm like, dude, I can do what these guys are doing. Yeah, that'd be easy, no problem at all. So I went, I announced her set. When she was done, she came up. She was naked, she handed me 20 bucks and thanked me. And I'm like, all right, this could be pretty cool. So then the owner of the club, and this was over at the Star Garden on Lancashire, right by FM station.
I'm not going to say I know where that is.
Yeah, right by FM station. Yeah. So all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I'm this 18-year-old kid making great money working around naked women. And my dad said, you need to go to college. I'm like, so what? So I can make half of what I'm making now? At the time, this was in the early 80s. Yeah. And he said, hey, everything that comes along with this, you're going to regret it. I said, oh, Dad, you don't know anything. And the next thing you know, the lowest time of my life, 1989, I'm strung out on cocaine, but I'm working around strippers and I'm a DJ. And right when I got sober, I got interned at Kiss FM Los Angeles, and then went and did Santa Barbara, did my whole radio career. So kids, just say no.
Yeah, I was going to say, the moral of the story is that don't do cocaine and to hang out with pretty girls.
And you don't want to say that they go, where did you go to school? And you're like, the University of Titties and Beer, you know, with Professor Diamond and Dallas and Misty and everybody else.
Somehow I can just hear you going, ladies and gentlemen, we have on the what are you, on the
tipping's not a city in China, but peaking is. So if you're peaking, you should be tipping. That was the greatest line ever.
I'm going to get $20 out here right now. Okay. God, that's off to a good start. So let me make sure I understand. So you gave up a promising career as a strip club impresario, disc jockey, and went into the more traditional route.
I did.
Christian radio, or just
I went into rock.
I was going to say you had some coming back to do after that.
No, it was one of those things. You know, it's like I always tell these kids. I always say to them, it's not what you do, it's what you do after. You know, it's like my dad tried to warn me of the environment, and you know, we're always going to go in various directions. You know, I come from a background. My mom was divorced 5 times. My dad was divorced 5 times. So in high school, I went to 3 different high schools. So my sophomore year, the jocks took me in, I played sports. This junior year, the jocks took me in, I played sports. That's in Alabama. Then I moved to California. My senior year, the stoners took me in, and I got introduced to something that they don't call them addictions for nothing. I mean, it took control of my life. I tried it, and it was a 3.5-year journey. But on April 4th, 1989, I prayed. I said, God, let me die and not wake up. And I woke up, and I have not had a craving since that day. I'm coming up on 22 years sobriety, you know. So he had other plans, basically. You know, I always tell people, I ended up getting to fulfill my dreams. My dreams opened doors to allow me to work with kids. You know, I played soccer. My AA sponsor asked me to coach his daughter. This is an interesting story. My AA sponsor says, my girls' soccer team, their coach pulled his back. You should be doing something good for the community. Would you go coach this girls' soccer team? And they were called the Miss Americas. So it's this pompous little group of 12 and 13-year-old girls. They were in last place. And he said, all it is 3 weekends. So for whatever reason, me and those little girls clicked. And I ended up taking the Miss Americas. We went in to do great things. I then ended up coaching high school soccer. Realized that the difference between a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old is about 20 years in the female world. It's not 5. And then I ended up managing Taylor Swift. I used more of my teenage understanding teenagers in my development and management when I ended up with Taylor than I did in anything I'd learned in the music business.
Interesting. Tell me how you got, you know, this is, I presume, still in your early 20s, right? We'll talk about Taylor Swift in a second.
Yeah, I got to Santa Barbara in 1993, and I decided at that time I didn't want to chase a job. And it was beautiful. Fell in love with the place. Worked for K-Tide, legendary rock station there, the Santa Barbara Bowl, you know. Everything I needed was there, and I felt that I could be a big fish in a small pond and really do some good things. So I was able to do a lot of community work, a lot of stuff. You know, when the laws changed, I had, you know, I've worked every English-speaking format of radio. And then right around 2001, I ended up producing 2 CDs called Santa Barbara's Unsigned Heroes. And we had a great music scene there for a while. Dishwalla, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Ugly Kid Joe, Snot, all those guys. Decline of Paisley, John Shavers. Oh, everybody. And we had 2 discs we did, Santa Barbara Unsigned Heroes Volume 1 and 2. So, and wanting to live in Santa Barbara, I always worked in clubs and promoted bands, so I always loved that. So in 2000, I was tired. I had been bought and sold 3 times in a year.
The radio station.
Radio came in, came in, and I had a T-shirt at one point that said, "Honk if you're my owner." You know, I had no idea who I was, and it's like if you're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I did morning drive. If you're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you better love what you do, and I wasn't loving it anymore. And I ended up walking away from radio, and not 5 months later, a buddy of mine called and he said, "Hey, I just bought my local radio station in the wine country above Santa Barbara." I said, "If you're buying it to sell it, I'm not interested." He says, "No." He says, "I want to make it something special. And there's a niche and a hole for country music." I'm like, well, crap, I grew up in Alabama. I guess that qualifies me as anybody to be the program director of this country station. And that's, we launched it in October of 2001 and immediately started bringing in bands because, you know, towns love bands. I had the radio station. I had the station and the club and the ability to blow these guys up. And that's what I did, and that's what ended up getting me on the radar of Big Machine Records, which ended up getting me in the record promotion world. Let's talk about that. For the folks
that are living under a rock and are not familiar with Big Machine Records, that's a company owned by a gentleman by the name of Scott Borchetta, who found a young, skinny, pretty little singer from Pennsylvania who wanted to be a country star. Her name was Taylor Swift. Tell us about how your paths intersected with Taylor Swift.
Yeah, when Scott came to me, I started a program called Nashville to You, and basically the concept was if you couldn't get to Nashville, we'd bring Nashville to you. So I knew that Tim McGraw and Rascal Flatts and none of the superstars were going to be coming to this little, you know, Market 200 in Santa Barbara. And for those that don't understand markets, New York 1, LA 2, Chicago. I was in Santa Barbara, so we were kind of small, but I knew we had a beautiful area. I knew we could offer them, take them wine tasting, we could take them golfing, we could take them pig hunting, you know, whatever they're into, we could create these amenities. So I went to the bottom of the chart where they were just starting in the 50s because no one was paying attention to them, and I said, I'll take them. I remember calling CAA for the first time and going, hey, how do I buy a show? I said, there's 2 guys out with Brad Paisley playing at the Universal Amphitheater at the time. I said, I want to buy the 2 opening acts 2 days apart. How do I do this?
I'm playing Santa Barbara.
And they came up and played my club. I remember the first time I got a writer, a production writer, and it took me 4 days to get every single thing that the band asked for. And when that bus pulled in and we come walking in, the artist was going, dude, look at this, look at this. He goes, we get drunk and just make shit up, you know, and I didn't know it was on a contract, you know?
Sure, it's thought they meant it.
It's on a contract.
KY Jelly was to see if you were paying
attention. I mean, there was guys asking for fresh underwear and socks. And we're going and getting fresh underwear and socks and green M&Ms and whatever they needed. But they would go back to Nashville and say, hey, if you get a chance, if you're out on that West Coast, you need to go see this guy because not only will he play your music and pack the place out, he treats you right, you know? And I realized how that wasn't happening for a lot of people. And Scott Borchetta and I went to the same high school, Sylmar High School, but in different years. And his dad had an independent label, and I went and introduced myself to Scott the last year that the ACMs were at the Universal Amphitheater, and he was wearing like a purple suit. He looked like Prince. You know, it's pretty funny. He had this purple suit and this curly hair, and I introduced myself. And he ended up reaching out to me, which was special. He goes, dude, you play music. And you don't wait. I said, honestly, I didn't know anything about a national chart. I just know I can make them stars here. I always say it's only unfamiliar if you don't play it, you know, and he got in. So he would start sending me music early going, hey, would you test it out and see what happens? And then I came to where we are here in Nashville. They had country radio seminar going on this week. And all of a sudden, the label started treating me like one of the bigger guys because I showed it's real easy to get support for Carrie Underwood, Brad Paisley, and Tim McGraw, and now Taylor Swift. But who was giving the love to the little ones? And that was me. So they were showing me love. Then all my buddies were looking around going, how do you get invited to these parties? And how come you're invited to this? And I started sharing with those guys. You know, we're only as small as we make ourselves out to be. If you want their support, show them support. And those are kind of rules that came on. So Scott ended up calling. He said, listen, Toby and I, at the time, Scott and Toby had started 2 labels under one room. It was Show Dog with Toby, Big Machine with Scott. Scott ran the promotion on both sides. Toby signed some acts, Scott had signed some acts. And they just realized they're not gonna be able to get both sets out. So Scott ended up calling me and he said, hey, I'd like you to be my West Coast promoter. I had no idea what it was. He told me what it paid. My wife said, you're gonna be a West Coast, you know, you do morning radio out of love, especially in Santa Barbara. So he doubled my salary. And I started doing promotions, and I asked him, I said, why me? You know, I said, you could have picked anybody you wanted. And what he said to me, and I'll never forget, is he said, I'm gonna say this as a compliment, even though it's not gonna come out that way. He says, you're too dumb to know any better. And I went, okay, that's a compliment. He says, Rick, he says, I'm starting this label with Jack Ingram, regional act out of Texas, Danielle Peck, who was on DreamWorks with him, and this 15-year-old no one's ever heard of. He says, everyone else will tell me and use that as an excuse to why it won't work. He said, you've just been going in one direction. You know, you've been helping us break these acts for a long time because you believe in them. So I came out to Nashville, made me an offer, handed me Taylor's music. He knows I'm a lyrics guy. He knows I'm a music guy. I called him on the airport. I go, dude, I'm in. I love what I heard. I heard the stories. I heard everything about her writing. And then the label was actually managing Taylor in the beginning. And I was helping keep her schedule and stuff. But halfway through, Scott said, look, you know, we've got the Jack Ingram. We're about to get a #1 record on this. He says, why don't I go ahead? We'll send Taylor out. You take her on the Nashville to You tour, my little radio tour that I had done, had a whole bunch of stations involved. He said, she needs to learn radio. You come from radio. Teacher. And that 30 days changed both our lives. She came out, she wanted to learn. She wasn't like most young people. She was a businesswoman, and we just made a deal. You know, we called it brother to sister. I said, look, and the way that California's set up, which is awesome, is you can start, we flew into San Diego, and we went San Diego, Riverside, KZLA, Ventura, Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, San Luis, San Jose, cut across and come down the other way. You know, it worked out really nice. And I said, listen, I said, here's the deal. I said, if you're willing to learn, I'm willing to teach. Sometimes we'll only have 2 hours to fix things, so I'm not going to focus on what you're doing right. So it's going to possibly come across that I'm being negative all the time. She goes, no, I want to learn. I said, great, here's what we do, brother to sister. We put our fist out. I said, no, after I say that, the next words aren't going to be the most popular words in the truck. I looked at her mom and I said, if you're willing to do this, I know she's your cub. She's never had a bad day, never sounded bad, never looked bad. I said, but I can't teach her if she's constantly being told how great she is. So in the truck, we focus on business. And Taylor said, I want to focus on business. And like I said, that 30 days changed both our lives. And then about 6 months later, they just kept calling me. It would be 8 o'clock in Santa Barbara, 10 o'clock in Nashville. I got kids, baby time. And I called Scott Borchetta. I said, look, dude, you got to get him a manager, man. I said, they're wearing me out. I said, I'm trying to eat feet and wash babies, and we're not curing cancer, you know. Finally, the dad called, and he said, what would you say if Taylor said she wanted you to be her manager? I said, I'd say I'm not qualified. He says, look, he says, you're not afraid to say when you don't know something. I had done so many good things with these young acts that I had all these great managers, you know, the Mark Hartleys, the Larry Fitzgeralds, all these guys, the Ken Levitt, all those guys I could go to, because I've never been afraid to say, give me 24 hours and I'll get that answer for you. Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, because so many, we get so many people that are interested in being a manager, and I find that sometimes there's this kind of innocence of youth where there must be some rule against saying I don't know, right? Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, if you sit and hang out with a bunch of grizzly old veterans, they spend most of their time going, I don't know shit. You spend a ton of time with a bunch of young people and they think they know everything. That's right. And the truth is, it's okay
to say I don't know, as long as it's followed up, but I'm going to come back to you pretty quick.
Absolutely.
And find out, because that's part of the exercise of learning, is understanding what you don't know and then fixing it by going and doing your homework. Right.
And the thing too is that nowadays you have no excuses, because the resources that are available to you. I mean, I read Donald Passman's book just to understand the lingo. I think half of the stuff in there's a crock of whatever, and like it's not real. I mean, it's like this hasn't gone on in since revision number 1, you know, or whatever it is. But I learned just enough of the lingo to nod my head, get the answers, pick up the phone. All right, Renman, they started talking about this, this, and this. What do I say? And you're like, good. Ask them this question, make sure this happens. I always tell people, I don't want to be an expert in everything. I want to know all the experts in everything.
I think that's, you know, and it's funny for, you know, a lot of the great managers, you know, I think wind up adopting that mentality, conscious or otherwise, where they hire a bunch of key players and let them be captains in the areas that require a captain, and they do a better job of just being in charge of the biggest part of the picture, and knowing that the people they've hired are hopefully trusting the people they've hired to own their particular area. I want to go back to something we talked about a little bit earlier. We had breakfast this morning, so it's not our first meeting.
That's right.
One of the things that, you know, that I think is important, more so today than ever, with the advent of social media and so forth, is having a personal touch, right? And I think in businesses outside the music business, you know, it's almost a given. If you go to a great restaurant, there's a maitre d' who knows it's Rick, he knows your kid's birthday, and you know, he's not the guy making the food, but he's the one that's making everybody feel good. So this idea of making it personal and having people feel that you care, I think is more important than ever. You took a very, you know, personal approach with Taylor Swift from early days. I want you to tell a couple of those stories that you told me about.
Yeah, well, one of the things that was interesting is I always remind people, I says, you know, Taylor spent 4 years honing her craft as a songwriter and building that audience before she'd ever recorded a CD and gone out to radio tour. And one of the things that she taught me, and I wish I could say I taught her, she taught me that she found this group of people that had a voice that they wanted someone like her to hear them. So at the time it was perfect, because we only had MySpace. There was only one place they were hanging out. So she'd go in, she'd go, wow, okay, what makes you laugh? Oh my gosh, that makes me laugh. What makes you cry? What do you like about boys? Well, that's what I like about boys. Love Story, Our Song. What do you hate about boys? That's what I hate about boys. Picture to Burn, you know. So by the time this record comes out, she went out and found a hungry group of people, and she fed them, and her CD went gold in 13 weeks, which was unheard of at the time. And they felt like they knew her. She felt like she knew them. They were friends. I mean, when she won the CMT Award, you can go Google search this. She says, this is for all, it's the CMT Award, the fan voted, at the time, the only fan voted award. So what we had talked about was take it out on the road. We're doing these 3.5-hour meet and greets. I'll walk the line while you're meeting everybody and let them take a picture with their trophy. So from the stage, she goes, this is for all my MySpace fans, and I'm going out on the road with Brad Paisley, and I'm taking this award that you won for me, so you can get a picture with your award. And the next day, front of Billboard magazine, the first artist of the MySpace generation. You know, there were just so many different things that we were able to do. But the cool part is that she still does it today. You know, her last record, everybody's like, so what'd you think about Taylor's last record? I said, she wrote a record for her fans. She is the one person that she just doesn't turn on the radio and go, well, I better write a record that sounds like what's being played right now. She writes for her fans. But what else did she do? She invited them to Nashville. She cooked for them. She drove them around town. She invited them into her home, did a live Ustream, revealed to her fans the cover of the record. She invited fans to follow her on tour and tweet on the tour and Facebook. It's just, there's something to that.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny. There's always been artists that have had a personal touch. I think in today's world, with all the technology and all the tools you have out there, and particularly with the advent of social media, you have a lot more touch points out there now, and you used to be only able to see and feel your audience when you went to a concert. That was where you saw them. Social media is kind of bridging some gap in between there, where people can get to feel like they know you a little bit more than if you were just counting on radio interviews, TV, you know, Rolling Stone magazine, not to pick on Rolling Stone. I suppose there's some prospect that you could overdo it, but I think for most artists in today's world, building a personal connection with your audience is important because it lasts longer than your current hit single.
Absolutely. And the thing, too, that you have to be careful of, and this is what I tell artists, is, you know, artists think that they have to hire a PR firm to do it. And that's where the labels screwed this thing up, is what happened was is they said, wow, some of these artists are getting some traction on MySpace. Let's just start using it to promote. And people were like, you know, put the brakes on because they felt they were being promoted to all the time. And that's one of the things that I teach is artist to fan engagement. You know, treat them the way you want to be treated. You know, it's like everyone wants to buy, but no one wants to be sold to. So what I say to these artists now is I said, if you're pretending to send a letter that says, hello, Steve, you know, Steve wouldn't send me an email with his big old banner and a big old picture of a mug. And so don't. You know, write them letters like you're talking to your friends. Even though you're talking to hundreds, nobody thinks that they're the only one getting this letter. You have to write it as if you're talking to one person. And these people want to know that you know them. I always tell folks, front row of the concert, worst place to see a show, worst place to hear a show, but it's the closest that that fan can get to the band. So why are we asking people to subscribe to lists? Nobody wants to be on list. Give them access. Give them exclusive access. Give them things that not everyone can get, and it can change your life.
Yeah, it's smart, and I think for all the artists out there that feel like perhaps they're pimping a little too much.
They might be. If they feel that way, they probably are.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. There's a balance, and you'll know it when you see it.
That's right.
I'm convinced of it. You know, it's funny, you know, I'll tell you how I met Rick. You know, a while back we started this little web show, which folks that are
great web show
familiar with our website know. And so we, at some point in that kind of that same tone of what you're talking about, easy to sit there and ask a question. You don't have to wonder. Ask the question. So I asked a question of our members, you know, who would you like to see on the show? Because it started off being mostly my friends, and then eventually started, you know, meeting a lot of new people, which was great. And one of the names that came up more than a few times was this guy, Rick Barker. And I thought, I don't know, who's Rick Barker? And so I did a little homework, and I kind of did some research. So that's how I found you. What's interesting is that you and I kind of share a similar predisposition to want to share some of the experience that we've had, the stuff that works and the stuff that doesn't work, in the hopes that it might inspire somebody, whether it's an artist or a professional, who's thinking about doing something in this business, to actually go out and do it. You got a thing called the Music Industry Blueprint. Talk a little bit about that and what inspired it.
Yeah, what I found was I found there were a lot of people that had questions, but there was no place to get answers. You know, it's like if you come into Nashville, and I'll speak on behalf of Nashville, first thing that happens is they send you to either BMI, ASCAP, you know, CSAC, and then they'll end up at National Songwriters Association. There's great vocal coaches. There's more studios than high schools. There was nothing teaching artists how to be artists. And I also kind of felt responsible because with the growth of Taylor, every dad with a daughter who could sing was showing up here in Nashville and just getting raped. I mean, it was like, well, you know what? We can use the same people that played on Taylor's record, and we'll use the same people, and $250,000, $400,000, $500,000 later, they were no farther along when they got here. And I thought about it, and I'm like, wait, when you start a business, you go to the Chamber of Commerce, and they give you this new business kit. There wasn't any of that here. And there were, unfortunately, a lot of great people recently out of work who only know one way of doing things. You record an expensive record and you take it to radio. And if it's going to take Scott Borchetta $500,000 to break and act with relationships, it's going to cost you as an independent artist $1 million. You know, they all thought we could do it cheaper. But and we're in this business where your rewards aren't in direct proportion to the work that you put in. And that's hard for business owners to understand. And I'm like, guys, we're trying to function in a dysfunctional business. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. And if it could be bought, I'd be selling them like hedge funds on the outskirts of town. But it can't. There's no shortage of money. There's shortage of dedicated, hardworking people that are willing to put in the time, even when it's not working, for their opportunity. I always tell people, it's not being in the right place at the right time. It's being the right person in the right place at the right time. If it were just being in the right place at the right time, why don't we have 130 stars that have been the top 10 finalists on American Idol now that we're into the 13th year? That didn't do it either. So I found this hole. So what I did is I saw something that said, host a free webinar, and it was free, and it was like any meeting. So I sent a tweet out. I kept in touch with a lot of people, and I said, hey, if anybody has questions about the music business, I said, I'm hosting this free webinar. Here's the link. And the first week I had 20-something people show up. Did it again the next week, had 80-something people show up. They started telling their friends, they're like, hey, Taylor's former manager is giving away this free music advice, because I had left Taylor in 2008. This is now 2011. And I'm like, wow, these people just want to know. And then I started speaking at some of the local universities, realizing that a lot of what they were teaching them isn't really what's going on. And it's not that it's not great history, but you always say this thing, what is it? Tell me what it is. If I refer to the past, it's
only to give context to the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I felt, is there wasn't a lot of context to the moment going on. It was just like, you know, a 16-week course on distribution. I can cover that in an afternoon. Give me a 4-hour class. There's 2 forms of distribution. The label does it or you do it.
And let's start with, if you don't have some great music, it won't matter.
You're going to be, you're not in the distribution business, you're in the inventory business. You know, you're just hoarding stuff. So I saw that there was a need for this. So then what happened is there was, and that's how I found you, is I started Google searching everything that was on, and I found John Oszaka and Bob Baker and all this stuff. And I ended up doing something, and this guy named Billy Youngblood reached out to me, Gorilla something Billy calls himself, and he goes, dude, you gotta go, have you ever heard of Renman? I said, no. He goes, have you heard of Incubus? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, go watch this thing. So he gave me a link to your YouTube channel, and when I watched it, I was like, oh, you know, the thing went off. It's like, here's this guy that isn't gonna tell you how great you are. He's not only going to tell you why you're doing it wrong, but he's going to show you how to do it right. And there were so many people telling people what was wrong, but no one giving solutions. They were all just given problems. And I've always swore that I will never, I always tell my athletes, I coach soccer at UC Santa Barbara, come to me with a potential solution. We're all smart enough, we'll figure something. We all know what the problem is. Everybody did was, well, you know, this is happening and this is happening. And I said, okay, and I went out and fixed it. I went out and did some stuff. Scott Borchetta, who is a great mentor, he always told me, he said, start it crazy and work backwards.
I think that's good advice. That's good.
And I always say weird wins, because 98% won't do weird because it's uncomfortable, which means I only have to outwork 2%. And I got a pretty good shot at outworking 2%. So it's done well for me.
Well, it's good. Well, you know, I think it's important out there, because the business has changed a lot, and even though so many things have changed in the business, you know, there are a lot of things that haven't changed. You've got to have great songs, you've got to have great performances, you have to be dedicated.
Absolutely.
All the people we've talked to today here at the Pollstar convention would confirm. You got to show up. You got to do your homework. And it's funny how so many people in the music business are looking for a checklist. It's almost like they're going in and ordering off a menu. If I just do this, 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 and this, will I be successful? And if the answer, you know, it would be great if the answer was so simple, but it's not. But what you will find is, amongst the winning stories out there, the great artists, the great managers, the great record companies, there is a certain common denominator of how they think about stuff, and they work through failure. They kind of almost embrace failure, because that's a necessary step along the way to figuring it out. And so if you're looking to do something big in the music business, it's important to have your head in the right place as a starting point, because if you don't, the rest is gonna eat you up a little bit.
I completely agree, and it's one of those things where what I teach people now is I say, I will have you prepared for whatever opportunity comes available. And for me, preparation means if you get the chance to do a gig, you're going to know how to advance it properly. You're going to know how to get the social sites of the club to work in your favor before the show starts. You're going to know how to properly talk from the stage to capture data while you're there. You're going to know how to sell merchandise, and then you're going to know how to talk to those people after the show. If you don't capture them when you have the ability to capture them, you miss that opportunity. And if you don't treat them like a friend, there's plenty of people online that will, and they'll go to where they go.
It's a tough business out there, and if you're going to have any chance of success, you know, it's you got to get some of that big picture stuff, but some of the little stuff that it's not so little, making it personal, keeping in touch with people, getting your head screwed on tight. These are all important things.
Eye contact when you meet someone, leaving your phone in the car if you're a young person, you know, learning how to communicate. Taylor did handwritten notes, which coming from a 16-year-old, 17-year-old at the time was unheard of.
Yeah, exactly. Unheard of. I can't even read my own handwriting anymore. So, well, you know what? It's been great to actually get a chance to meet you. You're like the wizard behind the curtain of Nashville. And you know what? Hopefully we'll get a chance to work on some other things in the future.
I would hope so. There's a lot of people that can utilize what it is that we do. You know, there's this fresh batch of young people that are hungry, that actually have 10 times the skills you and I could ever have. And if we can just get to them and teach them those things, and we've learned they're willing to spend to go to these business schools. Well, we'll just be an addition to that business school. We're not saying don't go to school, because I'm actually teaching now at a college, which is pretty funny. I'm doing an entertainment marketing course. I'm saying go get your education, but when you want to get that advanced portion of your degree, go to RenmanMB.
Well, I don't think either one of us graduated from college. It's not a recommendation, but if you're looking to do something big in the music business, that won't necessarily.
You know what? But let me say this though: we may not have gone to college, but I didn't get a chance to go to college, but I've probably in the last 2 years invested about $80,000 in education.
No, you got to keep learning.
Exactly, and get great mentors.
And what's interesting about it, we'll leave it at that.
You're a USC guy, right?
USC near graduate, yes.
Oh, near graduate?
Like a lot of Trojans, actually, you know. But that whole idea, you know, of learning has never been more easy than it is today. But you got to have the will.
That's right.
And if you don't care about it,
we can't teach work ethic. I can teach you how to sing. I can teach you how to perform. I can't teach you work ethic.
One of my great, you know, slogans. You know, you can't make people smarter than they want to be.
That's a great line.
God knows I've tried. That's all these lines in my forehead. So, anyway, Rick, thanks a lot for joining us today. We'll stay in touch here. Okay, that was great stuff.
You got it.